Could we have everyone reassemble in the auditorium, please? All right, may I have everyone's attention, please? May I have everyone's attention, please? All right, so now we're about to prepare to break out to our workshops. As a small housekeeping item, once the workshops are over, we would ask that everyone come back and reassemble here in the auditorium for a small closing session. I promise it will not be that long. So once you're finished with your workshop, please come back to the auditorium. All right, everyone, Sandra Wright, is Sandy Wright in the audience? I can't see you, Sandy, all these bright lights and big dreams. Where are you? Okay, everybody, everyone who has the emotional intelligence, who's chosen emotional intelligence, raise your hand, please. All right. Sandy is going to the door to the far right. All right, so would you all please rise now and follow Sandy? Everyone in the emotional intelligence workshop. All right, do we have anyone left in the audience with an emotional intelligence bracelet? All right, very good. Tanya? All right, Tanya Watson is in the back with her hand raised. Everyone that's going to the Authentic Leadership workshop, please proceed to that workshop and following Tanya. Everyone going to the Authentic Leadership workshop. Follow Tanya at this time. Everyone going to the Authentic Leadership workshop, please follow Tanya. She's at the rear door. Is there anyone left in the audience with an Authentic Leadership bracelet? All right. All participants going to the I'm tongue-tied here. LBGTQ session. Jill, raise your hand. Jill is also in the back where Tanya was. All right, everyone going to the LGBTQ session, please follow Jill, all the way in the back. If you have an LBGT bracelet, you are wrong. Please, you should not be in the audience here. Please follow Jill. All right, we're winding down here. Everyone going to the transitioning from military to civilian workforce. Tim is right here in the front. He's going to go to this first door right here. Everyone follow Tim. If you have a bracelet, if you have chosen the transitioning from military to the civilian workforce, please follow Tim. Last call for individuals with transitioning from military to civilian bracelet. All right. Everyone that's going to show up great, raise your hands, please. All right. Patrice, she's walking toward the middle door right there. Everyone, you are dismissed to go with Patrice at this time. All right. Everyone with a show up great bracelet, please follow Patrice at this time. Everyone with a show up great bracelet, follow Patrice. Thank you. And last but not least, we'll wait for them. Everyone that's going to the understanding, harnessing, and leveraging the power of the unconscious mind workshop, please line up at this front door up here, the first door, all the way to the left, and I will be your leader to take you down. The unconscious mind, just line up at that door. You can just stop at the door, and I will be with you very shortly. All right. So, the only bracelet that should be left in the audience at this point should be the action discussion for addressing generational differences for Mr. Vargas during his second tour here. So if you guys would just come on up, you know, every seat's a first class seat. Mr. Vargas will be up here in a few moments, and I thank you for your indulgence.
Kitchen conversation, that's what we're going to have. So come up to the kitchen because you can't get served unless you're in the kitchen, right? Let's have a real conversation, different level. Hi. Yeah. Yeah, sure. Okay. I know it's getting late in the afternoon. Hey, my friend. It's getting late in the afternoon. So one of the things I like you guys to do, you don't have to stand up. Just take a second to stretch just a little bit from where you are. And you can stand if you want to. But I believe in being physically active. I have lost 32 pounds. Yeah. I do yoga every day. This isn't being broadcast, right? Because my wife, I don't want her to be watching this part now. Anyway. Yeah, so I do yoga. I mean, I believe in this. So just stretch a little bit. Stretch a little bit. All right, go ahead and take a seat. And I'll ask you to just dive in here with me. I wanted this conversation to be small and intimate because I think all of you have the opportunity to go back to your agency and make incredible change. So we're going to talk a little bit about how you dissect that and actually do that, and you're going to have some dialogue together. This is kind of what I call the add-on when I go and I help an agency. Because it's great if you hear a speaker, but it's even better if you hear somebody and you come up with some sort of action plan that's going to work for you. So on that note, let me see if we can. Somehow does not want to. Let's see. We'll keep going until we get some stuff up there. Is this working still or no? Did the battery say goodbye to us? Oh, okay. All right. First thing I want you to do is just take a deep, here, and I was kind of joking a little bit. I really do yoga every day. So I just want you to, in a position to make change. And because of that, you got to take care of yourself physically. So I just want everybody to do this thing. We're going to do it 5 times. I just want you to take a deep breath in through your nose and out through your mouth. I'm not going to do it because it sounds kind of funny if I do it and I have this microphone on. But just take a deep breath in through your nose and out through your mouth. And if you can, close your eyes for a moment. Give yourself a moment of relaxation. In through your nose, out through your mouth. In through your nose, out through your mouth. And after you've done 5, go ahead and open up your eyes. Okay. All right. Some of you are in that Zen state. I ain't mad at you. We'll do a little work and get back to it. I'm going to say that you're going to have some aha moments, some moments here that you're going to just say, I need to remember and capture that because it's going to take some action. So if you have your phone on you and you're going to promise that you're just going to take notes on it, or if you want to write out some notes, feel free to do that, but you're going to have some of those opportunities. We're going to talk about, and we're going to have a deeper dive on what the research talks about is what some current generational issues or maybe some anticipated generational issues that you're having right now. And we're going to, again, make the meal together, how we can figure that out. And we're going to talk about onboarding. What was fascinating, whether we're having the conversation about first-generation professionals or on civility, both of those fit in the conversation of onboarding, because how do we onboard and we reboard employees? Well, there's a big component to that when it comes to generations, because the reality is we assume, and that's always dangerous when we do that, that people know, but they don't know. So we're going to break down onboarding in a big way, and then you guys are going to be able to do what we're going to call generational action plans as well. Okay, go to the next slide. Go ahead and hit that up. And go ahead and hit that one up. We did already. We breathed a little bit, so we can keep going. And hit that one up. Yeah. When we talk about aha moments, again, these are going to be actions that you can take. But I want to talk about additional insights. So go ahead and hit that up. And insights about work itself. Go ahead and hit it up. It's going to be 2 or 3 things that come up. 1, 2, 3. Yeah, that's good. 4. Perfect. Okay. I want to talk about, from a generational perspective, really particularly for millennials in the workforce, what are they thinking about this thing called work? Because if you don't know, how can you speak to changes or enhancements that they may want? So let's talk about that specifically for a moment. The bullhorn represents that they want to be heard. In fact, millennials have no problem letting you know they want to be heard, and they will let you know that within their first couple of weeks. And if they saw Dr. Carson walking down the hallway, they would say, hey, listen, Ben, do you have a few minutes? I want to mention something to you. That makes a baby boomer what? Cringe, because you're breaking code. How are you talking to the secretary? And it also breaks protocol. But I know that, and you know that, but they what? Might not know that. But what we do know is that they absolutely want to be heard. The second, the track represents that millennials' signature, and I didn't say that to the big group, but the millennial signature is speed to execution. Listen, if I can get it done faster, by definition, it's what? Better. So a millennial will oftentimes want to make their mark in the agency by trying to identify an inefficiency and then make it more efficient. The problem is nobody told them that I want you to do work first before you try to do anything that's efficient, right? And they're saying, but listen, if there's a faster and a better way to do it, why shouldn't I do it? 2 reasons. I didn't assign it to you. That's the first one. And the second is, I want you to demonstrate your skill set in this pond. I want you to fish in this pond before you jump over to that pond. We don't tell them that. And so a millennial comes in, what we tell them is a recruitment message. So excited you're here. You know you can do anything. You know what? We should do those things for you. But when they leave, we say, can you believe that person? It was 4 years before I asked for that training. So we're giving them a mixed message. Bottom left-hand corner, millennials have oftentimes gone through an education experience and a work experience that was scripted. So for them, when they come into the workplace, they're saying, oh, you hired me as a 343 program analyst, right? Great, wonderful. Well, what am I doing Monday through Wednesday? I know Wednesday's hump day, so we'll get over that, but then what do you have for me on Thursday and Friday? And I want to know, what are my assignments? And if you don't give me assignments, how do you expect me to do work? Well, because you are storied government leaders, you know that assignments sometimes happen on the fly. But the deadline's not on the fly. The deadline's tomorrow or the day after, but you know how to adjust. We haven't told them and helped them figure that out. The bottom right-hand corner is about hierarchy. As I said earlier, for millennials, hierarchy is you have a name and it's Jeff, and I have a name and it's Mary, and you're doing work and I'm doing work, and we all have the same level of responsibility and therefore equity. And the challenge with that is we are all equal, but we're not all equally responsible. So at the end of the day, your level of responsibility may be higher than my level of responsibility. So that gives you a different vote and a different voice than mine. But we don't tell them that. So what we say is, I want all your ideas. I want you to be disruptive. I want you to take what we've done and turn it on a dime. It's not true. Because there's this thing called the FTR, Federal Travel Regulation, right? There's a procurement process and a legal system for which you can spend money in the government. So our challenge as we start digging deep in this discussion is, how do we uncover the real message we need to tell millennials to help them be more successful in the workplace? We'll go to the next slide. Because I talked about work, and the next slide talks about the workplace itself. Go ahead and hit that up a couple times, right? So, yeah, a couple more. One more and we're good. Yeah. See, in the millennial world, right, if you can have, very similar to baby boomers, if a group of us can work on it together, that's awesome. So millennials have no problem in identifying that here's a project that's kind of cool. In fact, I'll give you a story. When I was leading a program at the Department of Energy, there was some millennials that I had on staff, and we were working on this project where we got a chance to film by the Washington Monument, which you got to get special permission for. So we started doing this filming, and one millennial thought, you know what, this is a good idea. So she texted some other friends to say, hey, we're doing this. By the time, so this group of millennials went down to start the filming before I showed up. By the time I showed up, there were 70 millennials that were down there. And I come there to give me a high five. Oh, Jeff, this is an awesome project. I'm like, I've never seen you before. Well, what happened in that situation was a millennial decided that that project was awesome, and they decided that it was something they should be involved in, so they just did it. But what they did not do was ask their boss. So on the way back when the filming was done, I was getting emails from peers saying, hey, Jeff, if you wanted to borrow my employee for a while, shouldn't you have asked me ahead of time? See, in the millennial world, that's foreign. Listen, if it's a good idea and I know about it, why shouldn't I be involved? Here's a response, because you weren't assigned to. But we don't tell them that. Second point on the middle section is where for baby boomers, the size of your office identified and the location of your office identified your worth in the organization. Millennials like to work in a flat kind of workplace. Listen, if I can, and I know HUD's done this, many agencies have had, listen, if we can sit at a table in the cafeteria and do our work, that's good enough for me. Some companies call it hoteling, right? So you're just coming in and coming out. The reality is for baby boomers, sometimes the office is kind of like a shrine. In fact, I call it sort of like their own little den, because you can walk into the baby boomer's office and he or she has pictures and of people who have died and plaques for programs that we no longer do, right? But the idea is, in the baby boom world, is so you walk in my office, I'm telling you who I am based on who I was. But in the millennial world, that's not the case. It's, can we all sit, all 5 of us sit next to each other, almost scrunched up, and work together. And in the interim, we can just, if we need to talk to each other, we'll just text each other. We're not going to speak because it's too far away, and I don't want to take you away from what you're doing. Because multitasking in the Gen Z world, which are a little bit younger than millennials can work on 2 to 3 devices at a time. Gen Z can do up to 5. So the whole idea that the workplace looks like it did 50 years ago isn't the case. The buildings are the same, but millennials are requiring us to look at the infrastructure differently. Next is millennials believe that you hired them and you will support them all through their career. Yes, I will do that, and I expect you to do work. But we don't say that second part. So when a person has a dialogue with you, the majority of their dialogue is about what they want to do. That's nice, but you're hiring them to do what you want them to do. But we don't have that dialogue. The bottom one just refers to something that I probably should have said in the bigger group, but for baby boomers, they believe in the 3 Ps. Picture, plaque, and pose, right? If you're going to have an award or reward process and system, you got to have the 3 Ps, and particularly the higher up the person is, the better. And if they can sign that picture, I reached nirvana. Well, in the millennial world, none of that makes sense. I just helped an agency who has a significant portion of their employees in St. Louis, and I work with them to change their award system. And I challenged them, and they came up with a new system. Check out what they did. Instead of giving a picture, plaque, and pose, they came up with these soft bats, not the kind you can really hurt somebody with, but that they could put an inscription on. So when they had, because they're a big baseball town, so when they had an award to give away, they had these bats. Then when people went through the office, instead of seeing a picture and a pack, they're like, how'd you get that bat? And they had different color bats for the kind of awards that they had. And it was like you hit it out of the park and all those kinds of stuff. I'm working with another agency now because the World Cup is coming up, right? So this is what this one agency is going to be doing. They are going to buy some soccer balls, cheap, Walmart, $10, whatever the case is, and a soccer stand, right? And then during the week, when they catch somebody doing something well, they're going to ascribe something on that soccer ball, put it on the person's stand, and they would come up to your desk, have the stand and the soccer ball there for a couple of days. Then your responsibility is to catch a coworker doing something right. What do you think is going to happen after the World Cup is done? That ball is going to be filled with all kinds of praise and acknowledgement from peers to peers, for which then the senior manager is going to have it as a visible display. It doesn't take a lot, it takes focus. So our challenge is, how do we get ourselves focused in there? We'll go to the next slide. Next one, yeah, bring up some stuff. Next one here. So we'll stay there for a second. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to have you guys start to do some work together, because this is a discussion, not just a presentation. And we're going to have a neighbor share. We're going to hit the next slide. And what we're going to do is I'm going to have you guys have a dialogue about what are some of the intergenerational issues that you're dealing with or you anticipate dealing with in the future. And then we're going to come back and we're going to look at some current issues and some anticipated issues. But what I'd like you to do right now is to have a little bit of dialogue with each other. Take a couple of minutes and talk about some things that you're seeing. Oh, yeah. Okay, excellent. I'll announce it. I'll tell him. Okay. Keep your dialogue going. I'm going to hand out a sign-in sheet, and I want you to sign in as you're talking. Make sure you get credit for being here, and then we'll continue passing it around. Okay, let's go ahead. And I know you guys are in the middle of something, so take another minute and then we'll bring it to the front. Just finish your thoughts. Okay, robust discussion, right? Yeah, you're seeing some things in front of you now that are challenging, and what's even more interesting is that you're seeing some things you anticipate. Let's see if your list matches some of what the research list, some of the things we're talking about. Go ahead and hit it a couple of times. Yeah, a couple more, and that's good. Stay right there. So for current issues, right? Tell me if this is some of the stuff that came up in your dialogue, and then we can add to it as well. But are any of you seeing sort of intergenerational communications? In other words, how people are communicating. And this goes back, I think, to Tucker's talk earlier this morning on civility, but how is peer-to-peer communication going? Worker to boss. Here's what's interesting, which is really interesting. Worker to second-level boss. What does that look like? Well, that looks like someone who's working for you talking to your boss or your boss's boss's boss, right? Because in the millennial world, listen, I know that person is 4 rungs higher up than me, but they're in the hall and we have an opportunity. And so that is again, breaks code on the baby boom side, but it's a generational issue. So stay with me on communication. Has anybody talked about that at all? Did that pop up in your conversations? Yeah. Yeah. It's a real thing, and how do people actually get that? How about, this is an interesting one. Oh, yes, ma'am. Yeah. You're 100% right. And this is why it's so important to have what I call real dialogue. And it's what we're doing now. Here's the message we give to young people when they come into the agency. We want your ideas. Man, we really do. In fact, the most senior person will say, listen, I got an open door policy. You can come on in anytime you want, right? The challenge is, and in reality, that doesn't sound like there's anything wrong. But here's the point. If the idea that you're wanting to do involves the big 3, I always say, HR, budget, or procurement, then it's unfair to you to offer that idea without understanding what the rules say you can or cannot do. Because if you offer up something that's a great idea that is outside of those things, you now put the senior level person in a position to make a decision on something that may violate one of those 3 things. And that means somebody's got to what? Back it up or walk that thing back before it gets to an implementation. So to your point, one of the things about communication that needs to be talked about is, what does true transparency mean? And there's nothing wrong with a senior leader saying, hey, I want to have open dialogue with you. I want to hear your ideas. I don't know whether or not I can implement all of them. We got to run that up the chain. There's got to be some sort of legal review. That doesn't mean your idea can't get implemented. All it means is it might be implemented a little bit differently or it might be implemented exactly like you offered it up. But what I know for sure is I don't know whether or not we can do that. A senior leader's got to be comfortable with him or herself in order to put themselves in that position. But if they do, they'll have people racing to give them ideas because they know that person is at least considering them, rather than say, open door policy, come on in when you want. Yes, ma'am. Yes. 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 This aha moment. You're exactly right. You never want to shut anybody down. You want to give them the proper mechanism, right? You and I'm a big fan. I'm super happy the Capitals won. I love the fact that they won. But I don't believe that their owner wants me to go into his office and yell and scream and say that, we want to cheer in that environment. Cheering works, but it's not necessarily in that environment. So the idea is, how do you give people the information they need in order to appropriately offer that up and that kind of communication? The one we're seeing and the one that my business is seeing is, what do you do with second level communication? So they're talking to your boss's boss's boss. How do you do that? I'm a big believer in having open, authentic conversations and then doing some role play between people, right? So you bring folks in and you say to yourself, what if, this may not ever happen, but what if it did? How would it look like going forward? Other comments people want to make? Yes, ma'am. Yes. Yeah, and Gen Xers oftentimes have no problem lighting the match, burning the bridge, and moving forward. The problem is we work and we live in a by the way, we live in a baby boom government. The government is run on the skin of baby boom. This is a baby boom government. And so how you say what you say matters a lot. Now, with Gen X, data matters a lot, so they want to know more information. And you see this now because OMB, when they throw out a request, 10 years ago it looked a certain way. Now it's much more data-driven. Why? Because the leadership at OMB is becoming more Gen X than it was baby boom. Yes, ma'am.
I'm at FDA now, but I used to be at NIH. And one of the things that I really appreciated about NIH and we're starting to do at FDA is the buddy or mentor system.
Yeah.
Because as you have new people coming on, trying to find similarities among people that have said and been vetted about being a mentor, you can have them kind of touch base with one another and really talk about the culture.
Yeah.
Because a lot of these things are cultural.
They're totally cultural. When we talk about onboarding, we're going to dive deep into that because you're exactly right. How about you want to make a comment? Yes, ma'am. Oh, the next area. Tell me what your world looks like when it comes down to technology use in the workplace. When it comes to a meeting, do people even talk about what should that look like? There's a meeting of 3 people, there's a meeting of 5 people, there's a meeting of 15, of 25. Do you have a technology use policy in place? And if you don't, aha moment, you can talk about having one. I helped one agency recently. They're having tremendous trouble where younger workers and older workers were not dialoguing well together. So we came up with an all-volunteer system, and the union went along with it, that said everybody can bring a roll of quarters to a meeting together, right? Everybody brings a roll of quarters. And we all agree that you put your phone in front of you, and the first person to reach for their phone, reach for it, vibrates, it rings, it doesn't do anything. You just feel compelled to touch it, you got to put a quarter in the ante. Then after the quarter's been filled up, it's 50 cents, and we all agree that that money is going to be donated to some level of charity. What do you think happened? People had a moment of personal accountability, and they realized that they weren't getting work done. They weren't being productive because they couldn't put their technology away. So my question is, and something to think about, is have you thought about a technology use policy for today as well? How about work itself? My goodness. Anybody doing any 80 right now? Raise your hand. You're doing any 80. How's that going out for you guys?
It's a pilot right now. It's called Maxi Flex.
Okay.
And if you have a doctor's appointment, you can work in one time, maybe 1 o'clock for the doctor's appointment. You can make up the time at the end of the day. There's 4 hours between 10:30 and 2:30. And you take that time off, whether you use annual leave or sick leave. And on Friday, there's no 4 hours. So you could work up, you can only work 10 hours a day max. And you can actually get a day off if you do that extra 8 hours on the pay period. It's a pilot. Prior to that, we had flex time, which you could work 4 10-hour days, and then you can have a day off. Then you can do 4-5-9, where you work 4 9-hour days, and then at the other weekend you work 8 hours extra.
Mm-hmm.
But I like the Maxi Flex. And because I live in Boston, traffic is so bad.
Interesting. So they're really doing it. They're MaxiFlex, yeah. And so this whole idea of any 80, you can work anywhere as long as you do 80 hours in 2 weeks, is happening. So it may not yet be happening at your agency, but it's happening with someone in your peer right now. So it's going to be happening. This is going to be a huge generational issue for many folks. And so I'd love to continue the conversation to see how that goes. Because what you hear sometimes from baby boomers is, when I was a baby boomer, I was coming up, what was my life like? I had to be first in what? First in the office and last out, right? And then the other thing too is, there's a question of people working. Well, here, what the research says is people are productive if they know and you know what's due, right? But if you don't know what's due and they're in the office, they're not really giving you anything more than if they were at home. So the real responsibility is on management to figure that out, all of you, all of us in that area. So it's any 80 versus 9 to 5. The last one is on leadership. This self-directed, listen, here's a skill set that I have, and I'm going to come up with my projects. You're good. You're overseeing my work, but I'm going to come up with my projects. Versus, you're actually my manager, and you might do this crazy thing called assign me a project. So, I don't know, has any of you seen conflicts in that area yet? Yeah. So I was going to say, the beauty of what you did is you've recognized that they may not be giving you the direction, but you still report out and report up what you're involved in. And there'll be some tangential relationship between what you're doing. The challenge becomes when an employee is just, they're trying to build their skill set. And so they're working on something either outside of even the agency's responsibility or what their organization is. But these are potentially some current issues. For some, it's been current issues that they're popping up. Any other current issues people want to bring up that they're seeing? Yes, ma'am.
I see that the younger employees, they want to take a risk. They're very risky. And I came from the private sector for about 20 years in government, I have 18 in government. And I had a hard time transitioning because they taught us in the private sector, take a risk, you're bringing revenue, and now you're talking tax dollars money.
Yeah.
So you have to slow them down. And the other thing I see is a lot of baby boomers are ready for retirement. And the younger people aren't hanging around. They want to climb the ladder fast, and it doesn't happen for 2, 3 years ago.
Yeah. Learning and development. Here's what the research says. People will take a job and stay in a job if you provide them learning opportunities and pay them less than if you pay them more money but don't give them the chance to learn and grow. And this is antithesis, because some organizations are saying, well, listen, if there's some way we can get them from a step 3 to a step 4, because in the baby boom world, if you made a little extra money, that gave you a little long longevity. It's absolutely opposite with younger generations. They would rather you pay them less, but create these kinds of learning opportunities where they can all learn together as well. It's a good point. Yes, another one. Yeah. So one of my co-workers and mentors, one of my bosses in my federal career is Jeff Pond, who's now the OPM director. So I had a chance to work with him directly, and I can tell you I've had some conversations with him and with others, and you're exactly right. Everyone knows that there's a whole cadre of people on this fence, and they're ready to jump if certain things happen. So that's another disruption that could be coming our way. I don't want to sound doom and gloom, because that ain't me at all. But if we don't have an honest conversation, you cannot attack that which you do not know, right? Yes, ma'am. No. Mm-hmm. Yep. You're. We did, and there hasn't been a real succession planning, and there hasn't been real transition. So we got to do work, right? We got work ahead of us. Can you go ahead and hit that? We're going to see what are some anticipated issues. Go ahead and go forward on that. Keep going till we get to the bottom. Yeah, one more. Good. So we can go back. That's all right. Yeah. So let's talk about anticipated issues. First and foremost, it's onboarding people to the world of work. How many of you right now know what your onboarding program looks like at your agency? Raise your hand. Okay. So aha moment for those who did not raise their hand, you want to get some paperwork and what they do for onboarding. And let me talk about that for a minute. There's a difference between onboarding and orientation. Orientation is you get your medical, you get your dental, or whatever they have, you get your retirement, you get paid, right? You have your tax information there. That's orientation. Onboarding is a longer process. It can be up to 24 months where you're onboarding somebody into the organization. If a person, and I think we saw an incredible presentation on if you're a first-generational professional, but even if you're not, you're still being onboarded to the world of work at this agency in this culture. And so the question becomes, how are we doing that organizationally? Here's another one. How do we collaborate as a team? Because teaming is different in the baby boom world than it is in the millennial world. See, teaming in the baby boom world meant you have a big team and about a third of the team does a lot of the work. I'm going to say that out loud, right? They're doing a lot of the work and the other 2/3 are serving as advisors and they're close to the environment, but they aren't actually doing the work. In the millennial world, everybody does the work. And when they don't, in some ways they call each other out. In the Gen X world, why in the world we got a big team anyway? There's only 2 of us that are doing the work, so why are the other 6 on the team at all? In the baby boom world, it's the bigger the team, the bigger the project. Gen X world, the bigger the project, the smaller the team. In the millennial world, the bigger the project, the more transparency about what all of us do. Yes, sir. Yeah, so he's saying, and we'll just in a second, he's saying that sometimes, and again, it's not to generalize all of them, but sometimes there's a millennial that comes on board, and they're brought on board, and they're in this job, and they were brought on board to continue sort of a legacy, if you will, of the work that was done, and the millennial's taken sort of a step back, and maybe a little bit somewhat disengaged, and all of a sudden the baby boomer's saying, what's going on? Part of it, it's going to get a little tight in here, get ready, part of it is in the baby boom world, because a person's reputation was attached to the performance of an individual, the baby boomer ends up doing that work for that person. And they will say it silently they got an issue, but in reality in a big place, because they brought that person on board, if that person is not doing it, instead of calling them out, they do the work for them. So they end up becoming what's called a shadow sponsor. And then the baby boomer says, did y'all look on my wall? It's been 2 years. I'm out today. That person's then been promoted to the 13 or 14. They now have a leadership responsibility for which they cannot execute because the baby boomer did the work for them. Yes, sir. Go ahead. Yes, you can. And we have a responsibility because millennials are begging for us to be authentic with them. So when you have an opportunity and you're working closely with a millennial, if you always use positive language about everything that they've done, which is natural in the baby boom world, you're doing a disservice to them. Because what they're really looking for is for somebody to say, listen, on that project, I'll give you a tiny story. There was a young man who I was mentoring on public speaking, and I gave him the opportunity, and I was going to be introducing a secretary of an agency, but instead of me doing it, I've done it 1 million times, I said, listen, you can do it. He's like, oh man, Jeff. I said, yeah. So he gets up there and he says, well, you never use any notes. So he didn't want to use any notes. Well, you know where this is going, right? He messed up on where they went to school. He messed up on 3 or 4 other things. And I was like, So he gets off the stage, and I was sitting in the back, and eventually he comes to the back, and he says, "Hey, Jeff, how'd I do?" And I was like, "Bad." He's like, "No, man, come on, seriously." I was like, "Bad. For the next 6 months or so, 4 months, you're going to be undercover." Why? Because no one's going to want you to do that. Well, I mean, at the end of the day, people could have read it anyway. You know, it might have been a little, it doesn't work that way. In the baby boom world, you were given the opportunity to have someone in a high esteem and reverent about sort of what they've done, and you just were, he says, "Yeah, man, but you don't use any notes." I said, "Do you think I don't prepare? If I don't use notes, it's because I memorized what I'm talking about. You did not do that." So it's a lesson learned for you. It's not about how you're on stage. On stage doesn't mean, it's what information you studied and learned ahead of time. But that was on me as a mentor to then have a real dialogue with him about what it meant to be, you know, significant. Yes? Is that on? He's turning it on. There you go. I heard it now. Go ahead. Yeah.
I can see where he was, my buddy over here, talking about the millenniums. Just like baby boomers, the millennium, not all of them fit that category. So you have some lazy Gen X, Gen Zs, or Qs, whatever they are. You have some lazy ones. And when you try to bring them in to a small group, and like you said, you just tell them, "This is the project. I'm going to give you the 2 weeks to do it. If you don't want to," and you go on and do it yourself, and then you bring it back and it doesn't resemble anything that was the desire or the description that you gave them. And then, like you said, they become laid back. And so you still want to keep them in a fold. You have a workable plan, but you don't want to cram it down their throats. So like you say, you give them the project and let them go off to the side for about 2 weeks, and that when they don't come and ask questions on how it should look or what it would be toward the mission, then again, when you leave them alone, then they come back with something that's unrecognizable. How do we bring them back into the fold without, making it personal, without making them feel like they're down?
Yeah.
But you still want them on the team. You want their ideas. Because I have that team of people that were with the 4, 5, 6 generation, actually. And I wanted to work, because that's why I elected this part. How do you get the 2 millenniums and the 4 different other teams to work together?
Yeah, so I'm going to answer a little bit and then go to this gentleman in a second. 2 thoughts. Yes, ma'am. Okay, 2 thoughts with that. First and foremost, this is secret sauce time, right? Secret sauce. They want to be coached, not managed, right? But coaching means you don't actually play the game. How many of you played sports? Any of you play sports? Did the coach ever say, if you were playing baseball, for instance, you're in the batter's box and your stance is wrong, did they ever tap you on the back and say, "Let me take the bat for you and I'll swing"? Happens every day in government, all of the time. Because what we do is instead, because it's going to take too much time and too much effort for me to get this person where they need to be, I'll just end up doing it instead of coaching them through it. So I'll give you a real case, perfect kind of case example, where you have somebody who is putting together a memo for a senior leader, right? You let them know, one of the first times they've done that, you let them know kind of the content that you want. But you don't let them know that even though they have completed it, it's going to be edited 2, 3, 4 times, maybe by you, and then it's going to be edited what? To the next line. So it might not end up looking exactly like they wrote it. We don't tell them that. So they hand something in, we edit it, and then they come back instead of looking at the edit to say, "Who are you to edit my work? Don't you know I have a master's degree in English and I got a 3.9675 in A, B, and C?" And all of a sudden you have now generational discourse. Why? Because we don't know the secret sauce is they want to be coached. And a coach tells you ahead of time, we're going to be working on this skills: pitching, throwing, catching, batting. We're going to talk about the whole range. We don't do that in the workplace. So what we say is we're going to talk about writing and editing and presentations and the whole, and what people do is they work in the space that they're comfortable and they know, and not in a place that they don't know. And so they have challenges. But the secret sauce is you want to coach people to be successful, particularly millennials, and not necessarily manage them per se to that success. I want to go here and then here. Yes, ma'am.
Okay, two things.
We can't hear y'all.
I didn't say anything.
Oh, whenever you talk, we still can't hear.
I'm not saying
Oh,
anything.
okay.
So basically what I was about to say is, number one is, it comes back to, I know with managers, supervisors, team leads, it really comes to how you're gonna work with that person, and when they're coming in, and we're talking about onboarding or whatever. And the example I used was, talking to the lady here was, the young lady came in, she's a millennial, and she's learning the business, and we're talking about a millennial who's anxious. Why does it take so long to do the work that you're doing? I just need to do this. So what her supervisor does is she says, we're going to take about an hour, 2 hours a week. You come in and we're going to talk. So instead of giving you all of it at once,
Right.
we're going to give it to you in pieces. So today we're going to talk about this part of it.
Yeah.
And I've actually had this to happen with me, with a supervisor, with a director. And he said, come in and, we're going to talk. Today we're going to talk about people, the people you're working with. Next, we will talk about something else. So it's a building. But when you're bringing in new people, and I've not been a supervisor, but if it were me, that first year to 2 years, their EPIs would be built so that it can help them to grow and to learn. That's me. Because I don't expect for you to grasp everything at the beginning. So that's what I would do.
So that's it. We can't expect people to know everything coming in because guess what? We didn't. You didn't hit the ground. Everybody says hit the ground running. But we don't hit the ground running at the same speed. We hit the ground running based on what we know and what we've experienced. Sir.
And I just want to add out what she stated.
Yeah.
So two things, communication and feedback. We hear that so much in the organization, but as we work together, and we talk about teams, and we all know that. And again, across generations, there are strengths and weaknesses that we all possess.
Right.
So when you have a team and you're sitting down with folks, one of the first things you want to do is get to know your team members. If you know they don't have that experience, if we know we give them projects, this is their first time, that's where that communication and feedback comes. And what you do is you don't just give them a task and wait. Now, again, sometimes you give them 2 weeks and maybe you want to see where they're at. But there has to be some dialogue in between before it's finished. So you know where they're at, you know that they're clear on what they're expected to present to you. And that way you kind of mitigate or prevent some of those issues from arising when they're giving a presentation or finishing up a job.
Yes.
And, again, I think, two things, communication and feedback. Those are two key essentials.
And within the framework of being a coach. See, that's the difference, right? If a manager is dictating and you're working with a millennial staff, you're not getting to them. It's coaching, and coaching involves asking them questions. So before you say, I don't think the project worked well, or I think the project was great, here's a hint. You ask them, so tell me what you think about how the project went.
Yes.
What were some of the strengths that you had? If you could do it differently, what would you do? You're building in dialogue, and most of the time, somebody will tell on themselves. Now, where it gets sticky, if the conversation begins like this, well, the project didn't go well, Jeff, because you didn't give me any direction. Ooh, probably not going to go the way you want it to go. So you want to be able, but you need to have that kind of open dialogue. You've got to ask questions of people so the answer that they find is within themselves, not from an external environment. I think this lady had a point you want to make. Yes.
So one of the things that I do when I have, thank you, new employees come on board is I have another specialist serve as their mentor. So they walk them through the process, what documents they need to use, how to contact an investigator, how to contact this person. So within 30 days, some of them get it, some of them don't, but either way, that other employee serves as their mentor for at least a year.
So I like that. I'm going to challenge it a little bit, right? So does that person who's the mentor, did you assign them to be a mentor, or did they volunteer to be a mentor?
They voluntold.
So-
but sometimes I do. I ask
Right.
my staff. I say, okay, if you have not served as a mentor for someone,
Right.
are you interested? There are some employees I will not have them serve as a mentor
Exactly.
because they are not up to speed as
Enough
far as their assignments
to do it.
go.
Exactly,
Yes,
exactly.
mhm,
See,
yeah.
because I think that's a good point. So we want to be able to have the right kind, I think you're doing it right, the right kind of dialogue about what it means to serve in that role.
Correct.
Because you are actually serving. And for some folks, they're a little skittish about that. So it's good to have that. Other things that are popping up on the anticipated area. This is why I want to have a kitchen conversation and not just a presentation. We'll go to the next if we can. Because, go ahead next, yeah. What I'd like to do on this one, go ahead, is I want you to take a look at this side, and keep it there for a second. We'll go to the next one in a second. But I want you to look at these 4 different areas, and I want you to see what are potentially anticipated conversations that you would have with a worker. And then I want you to get in groups and think about what your response would be to the kind of issue that you see in front of you. So go ahead and get in a group right now and have a little bit of dialogue together. And then I want you to think about what you would say as a sort of a senior leader, what you think a proper and appropriate response would be. So take a couple minutes to have some talks and dialogue now. Oh, go back. Yeah. Yeah. Okay. You go to. Um, and we won't have time to do all of them, so you guys can just pick one that you want to do. Yeah. Pick any of them, yeah. Whatever feels right for you. Okay, I know we're going to be ending soon, so I want us to finish this exercise. So come back together. Let's take it from the top. Did anybody do the meaningful work, make an impact one? Any group do that? No? Go ahead and hit that. Oh, you guys did it? Okay, cool. So work only on a job task that they're considering meaningful and connected to their life's purpose. How would you guys respond in that kind of situation? How'd you respond? Let's move it to the front here. Let's have a conversation. Yes, go. Yeah, grab that. See if the mic is working. Yeah, it's working. Good. Thanks for your help on that. Yeah.
So I shared with the group an experience where I had a student who was in policy come, and he was a graduate student and looking for experience in an area that develops policy or contributes to policy.
Yes.
And I'm in civil rights, and that's my area. So I did ask him, well, what was it that he was looking for? I also scrutinized his resume to look for things that might interest him.
Good.
But one of the main questions he did ask me was, that exact question. So
Wow.
what do you have right now that you would consider meaningful that I can work on? And I asked him to define it, and he told me, and it was relative to policy, but I did have some projects that we were working on that were down the road, and I said, well, let's see if we can fit you in to this particular project. And so I had my team include him on the conversation. So he wasn't sitting back just observing, he was actually a part of the discussion, the brainstorming efforts, the division of work, him coming out and saying, this is what I want to do. So he had an opportunity to initiate and grab onto a task, and I was gladly open to allowing him to do that. And he was satisfied. He really dug in. He worked really hard, gave me a product probably within 3 weeks, because he was there for 6. And with 3 weeks time frame, he gave me 102 questionnaire that we could use for our hiring management.
So on two fronts, I'm going to applaud you. One is you didn't take a step back and say, we all work on things that are meaningful, right? And just leave it at that. You allowed yourself to ask some more questions to figure out where we go. As you can see, there's a response that's up there, but I like what you did better, because at the end of the day, you looked to be fully engaged with him, and then he ended up giving you a great project in the end. Yes?
I meant to say the main thing was I wanted him to walk away and be able to represent the agency, that he had a good experience. And that was what was important for me.
Yeah.
For that millennial to come in and say, hey, I really got something out of this, and take it back and say, that agency really gave me a great opportunity.
And I appreciate that perspective, because other leaders, particularly most Gen X leaders, will say, listen, I hired you to do this job, and whether or not you had a good experience is going to be on you anyway. I need you to get this done. I think there's a balance between the two, because sometimes what happens is if that person comes in and then they end up thinking that every job is going to have that chance for them, when they have the opportunity where it doesn't, then they're saying, well, that wasn't my work experience. So it's good to have it with the balanced conversation that this isn't necessarily the absolute norm in every agency you work with. Yes, making the point.
See, what I find is when they do the hiring, they hire for a project need, and they need to start looking at transferable skills of other things that they could do. And when they hire them, look at the big picture.
Yes. If you just want this done, that's all you get. But there might be 8 other things you need in the future, and you got to be aware of that. How about the second one? Anybody do technology? No? Yes. Oh, okay.
All right, so we took technology, and what our response would be to that person, we all kind of agreed that You know, if they're that amped up and, you know, want these things to happen right away, this is an opportunity for coaching and explaining. Not to deter them or to hinder them or to just stop their, you know, their energy. We figured this was an opportunity to coach because we know they don't understand the government way of doing things. They don't understand all the things that we have to consider. We even had an example of cash apps, Snapchat using social media and other tools for cash and all of that. Whereas, you know, it gets pitched. We know in Silicon Valley they do all of this stuff and they come up with these ideas, and then when it come over to us, we start to ask questions about the security and those things.
Let me tell you, this is a real question,
Yeah.
and Snapchat is a real challenge. Did someone say they worked at NSF? I was at NSF. I was giving a presentation, maybe 200 folks, and the question I said, would you want to ask another generation a question? This one lady stood up and said, listen, what is this Snapchat thing, right? Well, another young lady in the audience told this older woman who had asked the question, she said, I'll show you at break. Well, the one who asked the question was like a storied scientist, and everyone was like, oh, I can't believe she asked that question. Well, you know what happened at the break? The young lady ended up leading, like she had like a little musketeer. She had all these older folks that she was leading in the corner, and they were all trying to figure out, what is this Snapchat thing? Technology is real, but the security aspects of it are real as well. So the conversation and the dialogue we have here, we got to let people know that their question in and of itself wasn't bad. There's another way too. I think you guys did a very good job on that. How about the third one, work environment?
I'm sorry. It was one other thing I added
sure. Yeah, no, go ahead.
that I thought was important. What she also stated that we would share with them the policy, because sometimes as new employees, they don't understand and know all the policies in place. And although we may share information with them, it's good to point them to policy so they get a better understanding. And again, maybe help them down the line when they're having these ideas. They will go and look at policies first before they provide their recommendations.
That's a fantastic point. And when we onboard folks to the world of work and government, one of the real conversations we have is that we have great agencies that regulate, and all of us are regulated in the work we do. So for you to come up and say, well, that's dumb, we shouldn't do that, why are we doing that? I'm not mad at you for questioning it. I just want to let you know it's the law. I'm not mad at that you had a question, but when you say, this hiring thing is crazy, we should be able to hire people faster. I was a recruiter for 10 years. I can tell you that's not a new statement. People are aware of it, but the system that's in place operates like this. I'd love to have a sports car. I don't right now. I'd like to drive faster. I don't right now. It's not the system that's in place. I drive a van, don't hate. So the point being, it's white, it's all right, it's good. My wife let me get a nice stereo in there, but what they call a swagmobile. That's what I got. Anyway, the point being is, it's not the system that's going to allow for that outcome. We just have to be authentic and honest with millennials and young people about the fact is that the policy says A, B, and C. We need to change the policy. Great, except that's not the job we hired you to do. Let's execute and we can work on that. The point of the matter is we got to have a real conversation. Good point. How about is there a last one, or the last work environment? Anybody do work? Yes.
I just want to say with the technology, you should also have a backup plan should your technology fail. That was just one add.
Oh, yeah.
So backup is always not to rely so heavily on technology. You got to still understand what it is that you're supposed to do for the business.
I got 3 fails. When I send my presentation to the agency, I also carry a laptop with me, and I also have it on a jump drive. And then if it doesn't work, all that doesn't work, wisdom cap. Come on, it's great for a reason, right? But the idea is you have to have those kinds of contingency and backup plans. And yes, ma'am.
I think I'm the only millennial here. I'm a college senior. I'm an intern at the Smithsonian. I think also with the cybersecurity issues with the technology, though that's a very valid response, but it's also important for my generation as taking that as a critique or as a response to what we're saying, is that the older generations need to be making an effort to learn and understand the technology also.
Absolutely.
Even if the older generation doesn't know what Snapchat is or Instagram or Facebook and wants to talk about cybersecurity, it's very important to us that people are making an effort to understand it and
You're exactly right. So learning the technology is an opportunity to do it. And a part of it is having open, honest dialogue with millennials about the fact that agencies have a wide disparity. You go to one agency and they are using the whole suite of Google. And you go to another agency and you can't access your email. And so the question, there is absolutely not a universal answer. And so it creates confusion because somebody will say, well, there's a threat. And that's because, not to get into all the details, but the CIO has identified it as a risk that goes on the FSMA report that says this is and there's moderate, there's heavy, there's high, and there's low, but this is a high threat, and they don't believe it's in its security. Part of that is understanding it. But when it comes to those, I call them the big four, right? Facebook, Instagram, Snapchat, and those are and LinkedIn. You have different responses from different agencies, and at some point, government agencies are going to have to come up with a universal response, but they're not there now. So it goes back to this gentleman's point on what is the agency's policy. And to your point, how can people understand it better so that maybe, in fact, they can see it in a more secured way? How about the last one? Well, we got a few minutes, and as we end up here, I want to make sure, can we go to the next slide? That, go ahead, next one. That we understand, and if an aha moment for all of you, and you're already talking about it, is how do you onboard? I'm going to give you a new term, reboard. Because if we focus just on onboarding, that's talking about who? New employees. So one of the things that you can think about doing is offering up reboarding workshops. Call it a reboard. And what are you doing in the reboarding? You're actually doing the same work that people are doing in the onboarding. But you wouldn't want to call it onboarding too, because people will say, what? I've already been onboarded. So you reboard them, which means you're just giving them a refresher on some really important things. Go to the next slide. So what do those kinds of things look like? We'll go to the next slide. Yeah. And then go to the next one. Right. Go to the next one. Yeah. Here we go. So why spend time on onboarding? Again, I'm a Generation X data-driven guy, so we can go through this quickly, but there's data that tells you why you do this. It's going to improve your retention. Next one. It's going to improve your productivity. And the last one on that is it's going to increase your satisfaction. So this isn't just because it feels good. You onboard and reboard because you get greater productivity about people when they know information. Next slide. Yeah, so what is reboarding? Go ahead. We'll go through this a couple times. This is where you're getting people to participate in basically the same kinds of things and learning the same kinds of things you would have had in the onboarding opportunity. You're going to give people a chance to ask questions, so you're reducing any kind of confusion, and you're getting people to understand things at the same level. Next area. And when do you offer it? I think you offer it at least once every 6 months. You could do it on a quarterly basis, and you make it open to anybody. We're just doing some reboarding. And you're going over programs, policies, initiatives that you know people don't understand. And nobody, quote, has the time to explain it to them one-on-one. You may not. So you create a reboarding environment where they can do that. Go ahead. Next slide. So what does that look like in a practical way? Go ahead. We'll go through it. Keep going all the way into the end. Yeah, one more. Yeah, one more. There you go. So what you're going to do is you're really going to make people and give them the opportunity to do things differently. It's a chance to kind of welcome them back into the agency and do other things as well. You're going to give them a chance to understand that they all have filled out paperwork, but we all have holes in terms of understanding programmatic operations and implementation. How does that look like? And finally, some of the things that people need is just a moment of encouragement. So I'm going to ask you this question and then challenge you. When was the last time you stopped somebody in the hallway to just tell them they did a great job? I'm going to do this right now again. I've already told Stephen he's done a great job. I'm going to tell him again. He's done a great job with this conference. Not just because he invited me, though. I think that was not a bad idea. I think he did a great job with this conference because he looked for people who could provide individuals information for which they can take and change the way their agency works. That isn't an accident. That's strategic in terms of his leadership. But that doesn't happen just on a program. It's when you onboard people and reboard them, you want to do it in a strategic way. Go ahead, next slide. Yeah, next slide. Next slide. We'll do this 1, 2. It's going to come up 4 times, 3 and 4. So, one more, yeah. So as we end, I want you all to know that there are 4 quadrants to onboarding, all of which need your attention, all of which are part of this true discussion about intergenerational leadership and collaboration. The first is on orientation. It's happening and it's doing well, and that is the paperwork. You know that it's taking place, and for millennials, they're very particular. They want to make sure it's all right up front. They don't like it when you ask them to fill out a form and say, oh, by the way, that was a form that we did 2 years ago. I want you to fill this one out. That part needs to be tight for no other term. But it is also letting people know about what that looks like. And you got to let them know in that, what does compliance look like? So these are just some of the areas of compliance, but all of these should be covered during your onboarding. As you came into the public sector from the private sector, I'm sure that if we look at procurement, budget, travel, or business processes, they were different, right? So if you have someone coming on board, I have 16 different classes, but one of the classes I teach is transitioning into the federal government. And it's for folks who have responsibilities in these areas, but no one's told them the operational activities. That's a clear area, and so we'll call that compliance. The next I call clarification. That's really performance management, but it's beyond just the paperwork of your EPIs. It's really telling people what does the dialogue look like about performance so that people have a clear portion to it. The one on the bottom, I guess it's your left-hand side, I'll get out of the way, that one's on culture. That one is probably the most important about onboarding. How do we do work here? Earlier in Tucker's slides, I think I said it earlier, she talked about, everybody comes, not every meeting starts on time in every agency. How do you take notes in your agency? How do you share that information? Here's another one. If you have the opportunity to go to a conference, is it the corporate culture in your agency that you share notes from that conference and do an in-teach when you get back? Or do you just have the knowledge for yourself? Well, if you don't know what that looks like and you're in an agency where knowledge sharing is critical, you might go to a conference and you didn't realize that there was actually some note responsibilities and you were supposed to do a teach back. And all of a sudden when someone says, you believe that? We sent Mary to that conference. She didn't even do anything we were supposed to do. She didn't know. Having said that, so what does the corporate culture look like? And I love this one, what does work product completion look like? Because see, what's happened with many millennial staff is we told them to complete X, Y, and Z. They don't do it the way we wanted. We grab it, we finish it out, then they're accused of sitting back and not doing it, and it's because we jumped in, right? So what does work product completion look like? I expect you to be responsible for your work and your work alone. But we don't identify that. This is, again, a short list, not a long list, and there's lots of stuff on it. And then the final part is, what does communication and connections in an agency look like? So here's a thought. We tell people all the time we want you to build a peer network. Do we teach them how to do that? No, right? So we'll say, how do you spend time with somebody who's doing similar work at another agency to learn from them? So part of building a peer network means that you're involved in interagency work. So I'll ask a question. How many of you have been on some sort of interagency committee? Raise your hand, right? And I think almost every person who raised their hand is a baby boomer, right? Or not, maybe Gen X as well, right? So the idea is doing interagency work helps to build a peer network. But we tell millennials, you should build up a network. I'm just not going to tell you how to do it. So what I like to talk about when we talk about this section is, how do you write out, spell out, speak out, and engage people on the things that are unwritten? So I said it earlier, but I'll say it again. What if you, as a senior leader, decide that one of the challenges you want to give your organization is, we're going to try to do a better job of transparency and writing out the things that we think people need to know to be successful in this corporate culture. Now, what's interesting about that is, people will say, who gets to finally decide whether or not that's the case? The reality is, I believe it's ever-flowing because cultures change based on leadership. Last time I checked, in the federal government, leadership changes. So that means in this time and space, the way that we do work looks like this. But things might change going forward. And finally, the reality with this last part is we have to let people know that not everything that they need to learn how to do is found on Wikipedia or Google. Sometimes the only way you know how an agency is going to have an operational activity in A, B, or C is by talking to the person who does that. And that requires oftentimes a face-to-face, or if you're in a different location, the opportunity when you're on travel, somehow you need to get with that person to figure it out. Because as much as we are a knowledge government, we are not a required knowledge sharing government. So that means the knowledge sometimes is stored where? Here, and not on a jump drive that you and I can access. That requires us to have face-to-face. We'll go to the next slide. We'll go to the next slide. And then up here. Go to the next one. Right. Next. Yeah. Okay, next. Okay, 2 more, 6 of them. Perfect. Okay. So here are some final thoughts on onboarding millennials. I'm not going to go through all of them. I'll let you choose your favorite one going forward. But the one I will talk about is on learning and development. I spent 10 years as a chief learning officer. One for the nuclear weapons program, 4,000 people, $11 billion. Another was the Commodity Futures Trading Commission, overseeing $600 trillion. Here's what I found out as sort of the top learning person. People want to learn bad. They are desperate to learn. And they will jump over you whether or not you got budget to learn. They'll go to free places to learn, and that's not necessarily a bad thing. You have to have a conversation, a real one, about learning and development. And in it, you've got to do what she did, and you've got to ask people probing questions about what is it they're trying to do. Here's what you may find out. If a young person would come in and say to me, hey, Jeff, how do I get my master's degree paid for? My response was, how do you do work first? And they would say, what are you talking about? There's no reason for the agency to pay for a master's degree. You haven't proven yourself. They get a little skittish. And I'd say, you're asking for a benefit for something you have not demonstrated the capacity. Now, I could give you the answer technically how to do it, but the agency hasn't seen that investment. So my question and possibility going back is, learning and development is a real, probably the most central conversation you're going to have. Next slide. And you want to be able to have it in a real and authentic way. Next one. Right. Next, and next, right? So for all of you, we spent time doing this, I want to end with you challenging you to create your own plan. And in it, you want to make sure that you are being intentional about the communication strategy you have with the younger workforce that you're leading. Next slide. And with it, you'll see, and again, these slides will be shared by the team, by Stephen and his team. Go back one, yeah. You're gonna, from our dialogue today, I want you to think about challenging yourself. Identify the issue. So what is the issue that you see most salient? What has the most need? When will you address it? What will you do? And then the final part is, how will you measure it? The reason why is, what gets measured gets done, right? And all of us have the opportunity to do it. Last slide. Next one. Yep. Go and go. So I appreciate the opportunity to have an honest, open dialogue. I learned from you, and I hope you had a chance to learn from each other. Next one. Next one. There's my contact information. I hope we can continue this contact going forward. So I thank you for that time. I know folks are coming in. Y'all need a break too. So why don't you go ahead and grab some water, take a little bit of break, and come on back for the closing. Thanks again for your time today.
Okay. Good afternoon once again, everyone. Thank you for your patience. Did everybody enjoy their workshops? Yes. Yes, all right. Fantastic. All right, good. How about the whole day? Did you enjoy the entire day? Yes. All right, we like to hear the cheers. That's great. So first of all, if you had a great experience today, there are things about today that you really liked, if there are things about today that you think we should modify going forward, send us a testimonial to EEO@HUD.gov. Your feedback is very important to us, and it helps us in planning our event for next year. It helps us in continuing to promote this as a featured event here at the Department of Housing and Urban Development. We're really proud, as you could probably tell, that we can offer this event not only to our employees, but to employees across the federal government. And we want to continue to be able to do that. So again, it's EEO@HUD.gov if you want to send us a testimonial about today, what you thought was great, where you think we could make some changes, mainly what you thought was great. You know, we want to hear everything, but your testimonials are really important to us. And speaking of feedback, we will also be sending out in the next several days a link that has evaluations on the plenary sessions and the workshop sessions. So we would very much appreciate receiving an evaluation back, again, because it helps us in terms of what our agenda is going to look like for next year and what sort of changes we can make. In that same email, you will receive all the PowerPoints from today's various presentations. So that will be coming out in the next few days. Now, for those of you who are attending tomorrow's Leadership Speed Mentoring session, first of all, are you excited about that? Yes, it's going to be a great session. My OD, Office of Departmental Equal Employment Opportunity, in partnership with the National Council of Hispanic Employment Program Managers, has put together a great leadership mentoring program. SES will be mentoring 13s through 15s. 15s will be mentoring 9s through 12s. So I think we've got a great program. Have you heard there's a parade in town tomorrow? Right. So there is a parade, but and we are so ecstatic for the Capitals, and they deserve that parade, but it is not stopping us from our mentoring session. It is going forward. Take Metro, come early, do what you have to get here. The session is going forward tomorrow here in this same location, Brooke Mondale Auditorium here at the HUD building. Registration begins at 8 and the session will begin at 9. So please be here. I think it's going to be a great day, and you're going to get a lot out of it. It will be worth the crowded train ride on Metro to be here for the mentoring session. So please be here. With that, I just, first of all, can't thank the OD, EEO, Office of Departmental Equal Employment Opportunity team enough. The team worked very hard to put this conference together, so please, let's give them a round of applause. As well as our conference planning committee again, because they really helped us to shape the agenda. So thank you to our conference planning committee. And all of our speakers and presenters, workshop leaders, thank you everybody. And mostly thank you to you, the audience. I hope this was a great experience for you. Thank you for your leadership in being here. Have a great evening. And for those of you coming back tomorrow, we'll see you starting at 8 a.m. Thank you very much.